So let's get started. So the first thing that we should talk about a little bit is what products we're talking about today. And the products that we're basically concerned with are anything that has to do with software. And so I've got some of those products for you on the screen right now. To be clear, that covers the standalone DSP products, which are the DM608 and DM810. It also covers the DSP amplifiers, so the D61200, the D4.800, and in the future, with the 5-channel that will be coming out later this year, that will be covered as well. And then the DM-RTA is in that category too. And then the accessories that we want to talk about today are the BT24, AC-BT24, and the ACR3. So those will be the couple of other things that we're going to kind of go over a little bit. Let me go back one slide here and just make sure. Yep, covered everything there. So basically everything that has to do with software. So 2 main pieces of software we're talking about today, which will be the DM-RTA app, the DM-SmartDSP app, or program, I should call it. And then we will talk a little bit too about some mobile stuff like the DM Control app as well. So with that, let's get into a little bit first just about the different applications and the different software. Some of you are nodding your head and are super clear on this stuff and you know exactly which ones do which. That's great, but there's a ton of people out there who still don't quite understand the difference between them, or they think that one piece of software does everything. So real quick, we'll dive through the 3 different programs so that everybody's clear on what they do and which one's for which. So the first one we're going to bring up is the DM Control app. We will use this live a little bit later in the training and show you guys this on your screen. The DM Control app is a mobile app that goes on your Android or Apple smartphone, and this is what allows you to do basic DSP control. And when I say basic, I mean this is for more or less consumers. This is for the driver of the vehicle. This is not to do a 30-band EQ tune while driving down the road. This is for switching presets, master volume level, sub volume level, basic stuff like that. That's essentially what the app is for. And the nice thing is the interface is clean. There's only a few buttons on it. So although, you know, obviously we don't want to encourage anybody to use anything while driving, if you're quickly pulled over and need to switch presets or what have you, it's pretty easy to do on the app rather than, you know, getting into a software with a bunch of options in it, or if you don't have a physical controller like the ACR3. So one thing I do want to be clear on too with the DM Control app or anything wireless with us is that you do need the AC-BT24. That's the piece that I showed you a second ago. This is what plugs into the option port on every product that we're going to talk about today. And the BT24 not only enables Bluetooth streaming into all of the processors and amplifiers and control with the DM-RTA, but it also allows us to run the DM Control app on all of those DSP-based products. So this will allow consumer control. It'll allow you to run the next piece that we're going to talk about, which is the DM-RTA app. This will allow you to run that wirelessly for the DM-RTA. So the DM-RTA app is the software that you're going to put either on your tablet, smartphone, computer, desktop, laptop, whatever it is. The software essentially looks the same regardless of what it's ran on. And of course, we'll use the software live here in a few minutes and you'll see what I'm talking about. But the DM-RTA software looks exactly the same. So whether you run it on a Apple laptop like a MacBook, or you run it on a Android tablet or a smartphone, it really doesn't make any difference. The software always looks the same. All it does is scale for size, which is really nice. You know, if one tech has a Android tablet and another tech has a Windows laptop and somebody else has a Mac desktop, it doesn't matter. They all see the same screen and they all have the same options. Let me repeat that. They all have the same options. And that becomes important with DM-RTA. It also becomes really important when you're talking about DM-SmartDSP. DM-SmartDSP is the app that we run on, same thing, all platforms. So Android, Apple, Mac or Windows. The only things we don't support are weird stuff like Windows Mobile or your Palm Pilot. If you've still got that cool BlackBerry phone kicking around in a drawer, we don't support those. But all of the popular platforms the apps will run on and are supported. So again, this app looks exactly the same regardless of what platform it's ran on. It will just scale for size so that it fits the screen. Obviously, that being said, when you're using this to set up and tune a DSP-based product, I would not personally recommend setting up and tuning a brand new fresh install on a smartphone. Could you do it? Sure, you could. I personally think even on today's smartphones that are pretty large screens, it's hard. There's a lot of options on there. You'd pretty much need a stylus to really get that done well. On a tablet, it's not so bad. The screen size is a little bit bigger. You can get to the options a little bit better. But the thing with the DSP software is to do any sort of the updates or things that we're going to talk about today, a key part of that is knowing that you must be plugged into the products. So the Bluetooth connectivity is great. It's great for making changes. It's great for, bumping up the bass a little bit when the customer comes back and asks for a little bit more. It's great for changing a preset or whatever. But for initial setup and tuning, I always recommend plugging in via USB for two reasons. A, USB is stable. It's easy. You know that there's a cable there and that you're going to have success. But B, to do software updates and firmware updates, you have to be plugged in to a physical computer. You have to be plugged into something with a USB port. So we'll get into a little bit more of that on how to do the updates and that sort of thing in a minute, but I just want to take you guys through the software a little bit first and give you a couple ideas of what we're working with today. So
I'm going to throw in my first 2 cents here.
Go ahead.
Almost every single time somebody is doing the initial tune and they say they've lost the tune, it's almost always because they're doing it wirelessly. It's always either they're using a phone or an iPad, and we're not saying that's a bad thing, but it's so much easier to press and save your presets when you're hardwired using a PC or Mac. There's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it definitely would make, if I was still in a shop and doing this on a daily basis or a weekly basis, I would absolutely have a computer in the shop, and I would make sure every one of these is set up the first time with a computer. And that way you just make sure all your updates are out of the way. Everything's, up to the most current software and firmware. And then after it's up and running, if you want to sit in the driver's seat and it's more comfortable for you to use a tablet or whatever, fine, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. But I personally, with laptops these days being as thin and light as they are, I really see no reason not to use one. So let's move on to some products. So the DM-RTA is the first thing we're going to talk about, since it's kind of all by itself in this category. And then we'll get into the other DSP-based products and software here in a minute. So with the DM-RTA, this obviously uses our DM-RTA software. I'm going to launch that here in just a second and go through how to do some things with this. The DM-RTA, we're not going to get into the tool itself and all of the really cool stuff it can do because most of you are familiar with it. And if you're not, we've done multiple trainings on this tool and everything that it can do. You can always go back on Facebook or real quick here, pretty soon, probably this week, YouTube, and be able to go through and see some of those old trainings and watch one on the DM-RTA if you're not familiar with it. But this is our testing and tuning tool. This is not something that stays in the car. This is not a piece that is usually mounted in a forever part of a system. This is a tool. This is something that's going to stay in the shop in most cases. So let's open up the DM-RTA software. What I want to do is I'm going to get the DM-RTA software opened up here, and I'm going to show you guys a couple of cool tips and tricks, give you guys some ideas on what we can do with this. And let me get this guy plugged in, powered up, and there we go. So let me get my screen shared. There we go. Cool. All right, so as soon as I plug in my DM-RTA via USB, the USB here on the top is the one that we want to use, and launch the software, this is what we should see. Hardware is online. If you are not getting this message, you are not connected to the DM-RTA. And that really goes for pretty much all of our products. There should be some sort of dialogue that pops up. If you're getting nothing, then either the port that it's plugged into is not working, the cable's bad, the product's not powered up, you know, there's something else going on there. So that's just kind of basic troubleshooting, or tip 101 is make sure that we get some sort of dialog box popping up. You should also see up in the top right hand corner of the software, there's a little green light up there, right by the battery life in this case. And that little green light is showing you that there is connectivity. If that does not appear to be lit up, if that little green light is dim, let's call it, that's going to mean that you're not connected. Basically, even if it appears that you are, if that little green light's not lit up, you are not actually connected and making changes. So when I first hit OK on this, it takes me into my software here. And one of the things that I want to show you guys how to do, and this is really, really simple, but something that I think everyone should know how to do, is when we click on the Help button up here at the top, one of the things that we want to be able to do is go to About and have a look at our app build date and our firmware version. So I purposely opened up an older version of this software with this product, and I want to show you what this would normally look like. So this is what it would look like if you plugged in your DM-RTA. This is the app that you had on your computer. This is the DM-RTA that you had. This is what you get. It works fine, right? Everything's connected, everything's working. I can go in here, I can make changes, I can do what I need to do. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually open up a newer version of the DM-RTA software, and I'll share that with you guys as well.
So again, this is really the most common issue. I mean, this is 90% of the time. And today we're going to go over and share with you guys some stuff. So if you do connect and you don't see that pop-up message and you don't see that light green, what do? Right? So
exactly. So I'm going to try to make this not connect basically here for a second. See if I can force it to show you guys what I want it to show you. And we're going to go through a software update is basically what we're going to do here. So bear with me for just a second here, guys.
And this is going to apply to basically any product when you're connecting the software to firmware. Another important thing is to make sure you're deleting, multiple things. So Matthew and I, we can have 6 or 7 different software loads on our laptops at a time as we're testing different things, or we're trying to duplicate tech support. So what happens is somebody plugs into something and it has software X and we're having a hard time figuring out why it won't connect. We can then go back through, reflash the firmware and see exactly what you're seeing on stuff.
So what I did is the first time I plugged in, you guys, I was basically showing you software from April. So if you were still running your DM-RTA software from April, let's say that's the last time you went to our website and you downloaded our DM-RTA software, which is not uncommon, right? We don't all go back to the website and check for new software all the time. But what you need to understand is that our firmware is bundled into our software, okay? So that's the part I think a lot of people don't understand is they go, well, I have the software already. Why do I need to re-download the software? Because the current firmware for the product is bundled into the current software. So in most cases, what you'd want to do is you'd want to delete the software that you currently have off your computer, go to our website, download the latest version. And if that's what you did today, this is exactly what you'd see on your screen is what you're seeing right now. So now I'm plugging in and it's telling me there's new firmware. If I say I'd like to continue, I'll hit yes. It's going to go through a firmware upgrade or upload, which is pretty fast. It doesn't take very long. So we'll sit and wait for that to happen. But while this is happening, what we're going to do is after this is done, we're going to go into the help menu again, and we're going to double check our versions. And that's one of the things that I always do pretty much anytime I'm helping anybody with tech support stuff or going through and they're having connectivity issues or whatever the case may be, is I'll always ask them to go to that help menu, go to the about section, and tell me, which app build are you running? Is it the latest one? What's the date on it? What firmware version are you running? All that good stuff. So now that the update's complete, it'll come up and tell me hardware is online. If I click OK here, and you'll notice now up in the right-hand corner, I have my little green light. My battery indicator is showing 100%, which is correct. And if I go to help and about, you'll notice now I'm running a much newer version of the software. Remember earlier we were running an April version and we were running 0.71 firmware. Now we are updated to 0.73 and we're a much later app build. So now we're guaranteed that our DM-RTA is running the latest firmware, our software is the latest, everything's up to date, and all is well. Now, what if you have already updated your application on your computer or your software, but you can't get it to connect, or the green light is coming on in the corner, but it never comes up and says hardware is now online. There are some weird situations where maybe a computer dies in the middle of a software update. I know that sounds kind of far-fetched, but you would not believe how many times a week we get calls from guys that say, I was right in the middle of updating software or firmware or whatever, and my computer died. I didn't have it plugged in, blah, blah, blah. So I guess that should really be rule number one, you guys. Have your computer plugged in when you're doing these things. It'll save you so much headache later, or at least make sure your computer's at, 80% or something, or something along those lines, because there's nothing more frustrating than dealing with 30 minutes of BS because your computer died. It could have been, easily remedied by just having it plugged in or having the battery charged. So now that this is done,
I will say, I want to add too, and make sure your
Yeah.
vehicle hasn't been sitting with the doors open and DC offset on all dang day without a charger, because it's really hard to update firmware into an electronic piece when it's at 10 volts. All right, so
say when it's sitting at 9.5.
yeah, so let's make sure we got that going as well. So let's make sure both the vehicle and your laptop are plugged and ready to have you be able to do this for a 3 or 4 minute process while you're getting the firmware software update done.
That's probably a good idea. That's a good tip for sure, because there are, like I said, so many times where I don't know why it is, but people just, I don't know, it seems like the car or the computer always dies in the middle of a software update. And we'll cover that when we get into the DSP products too, because it's more likely that something's going to happen with those, only because, this is a tool. It's not going to be mounted in a car, but still the same rule applies. Make sure your battery's connected, and make sure you have, your power supply connected to your computer or what have you. So if we do get into a situation where for some reason we cannot get the DM-RTA to come up, it will not connect, you're making changes or you're doing measurements and you're not seeing anything happening in this display, but your green light is on up in the corner, the battery indicator seems to be reading accurately, what you can do is you're going to go to Tools and you're going to go to Update Devices Firmware. Now, this is going to open up a little dialog box, and I'm assuming that you guys can see that same dialog box on your screen. I believe you can see the pop-ups and everything. Perfect. So depending on your computer, this file that we're looking for is going to be in a couple of different places. If you're using a PC, it's going to be in your C drive under Program Files, and it'll say Program Files, and then it'll say Program Files x86. And if you go into that, what you'll see is you'll see all of the different applications on your computer. And what you want to look for is the one that is, whatever software you're playing with. So if we're looking at the DM-RTA software, we want to look for the folder for DM-RTA. And within that folder is going to be a bunch of files for all of the different products. In the DM-RTA's case, it's just going to be the DM-RTA. And on a Mac, it's a little bit different. On a Mac, it is in the application itself. So like on my computer, mine's already kind of in the right spot here, but if I wasn't already there, I would be going to Macintosh HD, Applications, and then you can see all of my different instances there of DM-RTA. I've got a lot of them. But in your case, you should only have one instance. If you have one instance of DMRTA, you would double click on the app itself, and that has the program files in it with the firmware in there to manually force an update. And I'll show you that stuff on the DSP products in a moment as well. But that is probably one of the best tricks I help guys with when it's 6 o'clock at night on a Friday and they call me and they go, man, this thing is not connecting. I don't know what happened. It was working an hour ago. Now it can't. You know, I restarted the car or the battery died or whatever. That manually reloading the firmware is a lifesaver. When all hope is lost, that seems to be the one that gets everybody back online. And we'll go through that process again here in a few minutes with the other program. So if you missed that or you didn't quite follow along, we'll cover it again here in just a sec.
And then
one of the other
Facebook,
things, yeah, go ahead.
On Facebook, Felix was asking, what's the latest version? And it depends on which product, obviously, whether you're you know, the biggest one that people are always asking about is the the DM Smart app. What's the latest version on that? Everything that Matt just showed you guys is also reversible. So when you do go into your program files x86, if you have as many as Matt has on his computer, then before you update, it's probably best to go and delete out a bunch of those and get the latest one from our website, because it's also reverse capable. What I mean by that is if the last time you installed a DM processor was 6 months ago and you buy one from us and we ship it to you, it's going to have the latest firmware, but your computer has old software. When you plug in, it's going to say, you're going to have that menu that pops up and says, there is a newer version. What's happening is it's telling you that they do not line up and that either your laptop has really old, saying, hey, there's a new version of software that you should be using. If you click yes, you're going to load old firmware onto the DSP. So almost every one of us manufacturers, when we all train and we train together, it doesn't matter which brand it is, we always recommend that if it's been more than a month or so since the last time you plugged into whichever brand, for us, obviously, an audio control product, delete it, go to our website, download the latest version. And if you plug in, and like I said, you just ordered a new product, chances are it's going to connect the first time. You're never going to have an issue. And that's the key. So I would always recommend, if it's been more than a month since you plugged in the last time, delete your computer software, go to the website, get the latest.
Yeah, we really can't stress that part of it enough. That seems like a really simple thing, but you'd be surprised again how many times I go to help somebody and maybe I even you know, screen share with their computer and I'm going through and they have 3 or 4 instances of the software on their computer. Now again, you'll have to kind of ignore Chris's and mine's a little bit because we need multiple instances of it on ours. But for the average guy that's just, you know, doing this and is just doing it professionally and needs to install this stuff, you don't need any more than the most recent version. You don't want to have any of the previous versions on there. Make sure it's always the most current. So with that, the last thing I want to talk about on the DM-RTA, and this is another common one that gets brought up a lot, is, and it's not quite software based, but it's computer related, so I want to talk about it, and that is how to use the internal drive on the DM-RTA. So for those of you that don't know, the DM-RTA itself, on the face of it, has a USB port. On the top of it, there's a USB port as well. When you're looking at the DM-RTA, the one on top is for connecting to a computer. This is a USB-B port, so like B for boy. And it's kind of like a printer cable, if you remember what those look like. It's that style of cable. It's a really big, robust, solid cable, which is why we chose it for that. No issues with connectivity there, really solid. But that is for connecting to a computer and using the software. The USB that's on the front of the DM-RTA is actually an output. And what I mean by output is essentially when you're using the DM-RTA and you're playing a test tone or a sine wave or pink noise from within the DM-RTA software, it has to have that sound somewhere, right? That sound file has to be stored somewhere. Well, it's stored on an internal drive inside the DM-RTA. So we thought, well, why not make that drive accessible so that people can not only use it, but use it to put their own files and things on as well. So in the DMRTA Pro Kit, it comes with a really cool USB cable that looks like this. It is this blue one here, which has USB-A male ends on both sides. So it's kind of a unique cable. It's not something that most people are going to have laying around the house like you might with a USB micro or something else. So I'll show you how to use this drive. It's really simple. Plug into the front of your DMRTA, take the other end of this blue cable and plug it into your computer. And then I'm going to screen share here and I'll show you how this works. So let me go out to my desktop here. Okay, so on my desktop, you will now see that there is a little drive right here that says DM-RTA. If I double click on that drive, it's going to open up a little window here and we will see, there we go. Inside, this is the drives that come from the factory on the DM-RTA's internal drive. There's several different file formats so that we could have the best mix of compatibility and audio quality. But this is where we store all of the factory test tones and sound files for the pink noise and all of that stuff. And you can look around in here, you can click in these and see there's all of our different pink noise files and all of that good stuff. Test tones, all that good stuff is in here, right? Now, you can also use this though, like I mentioned, as a thumb drive. So if you want to put some of your favorite test tracks that are actually musical tracks on here, this is a great way to do it and make sure that every vehicle you get into, you have all your stuff with you. You don't have to bring your phone and pair it to customers' vehicles. You're not bringing a separate thumb drive full of music tracks. You're not worrying about bringing that old scratched up demo disc that's been floating around the shop forever. So on my desktop, you'll also see I have something that I call music demo tracks. And if I open up that folder, I put, whatever, 7 or 8 songs in there that I tossed in there just to show you guys what this looks like. And some of them are MP3s, some of them are protected files. So I just had a couple of different things on there just to give you guys an idea. So all I did was drag and drop some of my favorite music files in there for demoing systems, let's say. I tossed those in a folder. And really all I'm going to do, you guys, is drag and drop. It's incredibly simple. Take the music files, drag them onto the DMRTA. It's doing the transfer right now. There it goes. And once it's done, now every vehicle that I get into, I now have those, whatever it was, 8 files on my DMRTA. Just to give you an idea on the DMRTA drive itself, let me right click it here and I can show you how much space there is. I believe it is. So it is a 16 gigabyte drive. There's 14.6 gigs available when it comes to you. So that drive is hardly used by those factory files. There's a lot of free space on there. 14, 15 gigs of demo tracks is a lot, obviously. I mean, how many do you need, right? So put all your favorite music tracks on there. Now, the key thing to this, and I know the dragging and dropping part is rudimentary and elementary simple, and there's almost no reason for me to even show it to you, but you wouldn't believe how many people ask to see that process. It's super, super easy. Drag and drop your files on there. Every car you get into, you have those music tracks. But the part that I want to make really clear, because this is the part people get confused on, is within the DM-RTA software, you have the option to play pink noise, sine wave, square wave info. There is no option within the software to play music files. So once those files are loaded onto that internal drive on your DMRTA, I get the question, oh, well, great, I got them loaded on there, but how do I use them? Well, you're gonna need to use this same cable, okay, to plug into your head unit. So now use this cable, and instead of plugging it in your computer, plug it into your Pioneer, Kenwood, Alpine, factory radio, whatever radio you have that has a USB, and you should be able to read the files on this drive and play it just like as if it were a thumb drive. Now you're going to use the File Explorer or file management system on the head unit to play those music tracks. Again, you're not going to use the DM-RTA software. You're going to use the factory head unit or your aftermarket touchscreen or whatever it is that you have. That's how you're going to access those files, and that's how you're going to play those. So I know that seems really simple, but it is something we get asked a lot. So I did want to cover that one real quick while we're talking about the DM-RTA. So now we can get back to some of the other software stuff here. Let me get this open back up. And let's move on. All right, so next couple of things that we wanted to talk about are DSP amplifiers and the software that goes along with them. Now, I'm going to lump these all into one category because they use all the same software. So I see no reason why not to lump them together. So the D4800 and the D61200 use the same DM-SmartDSP software as our DM608 and DM810. Those are all going to use the same stuff. Now, like we mentioned earlier, before I get ahead of myself, you want to do this initial process, and most of the things that we're going to talk about today as far as updating software and firmware updates and all that stuff, you have to do that through a USB cable. So do keep that in mind while we're going through this. I know we've already mentioned it, but I do want to keep bringing that up because it's important. We get asked a lot how to update software and firmware via Bluetooth, and you can't. You have to do it with a cable. So the DM608 also uses that same software, as does the DM810. So those are the four products that we're basically talking about today as far as how to do the following processes. So before we get into this, let me close this out, and I'm going to get the software connected here, and we'll have a look at these. Let me just get a DM processor plugged in, and we will go from there.
And one of the things that I would just talk about too is the fact that, you know, we're all, most of us, a lot of us are installers, right? That's where we got our start. We know audio, we know what it should sound like, we know how to build dynamic systems. Not all of us are, you know, software gurus or computer technicians or, you know, most of us were intimidated to use a computer in the audio system for a lot of years. But it's just what we have to learn. So we have to learn the software firmware and how to make sure we're using it appropriately to be audio technicians at this point, you know, whether it's the DM-RTA or the, you know, the D4800 amplifier. So
agreed. And that's one of the things today is in today's world, if you're going to do products from any brand, you pretty much have to know at least your way around a computer. Like Chris said, we're not all software guys, we're not all computer guys, but today, no matter really which part of the industry you're in, hey, if you're doing remote starts and security all day, you still have to use a computer, right? You got to update those modules. You got to, you know, flash firmware and software and all that stuff. The same goes for audio these days. More and more systems are including DSPs. More and more amplifiers are going digital. You know, whether it's with us or whatever company, you're going to have to know at least your way around a computer a little bit to be able to do this. So if you have been thus far kind of scared of software, trying to stay away from anything that requires software, I get it. But at the same time, you're going to have to take the plunge eventually. If you want to stay current and you want to stay relevant in this industry and for your customers, you know, give them the best experience, you're going to have to at some point. So we're trying to make that easy, and hopefully these trainings help do that a little bit. So you should be seeing the DM-SmartDSP software on your screen right now. This is the software that's used for the four products we're talking about: the DM608, the DM810, D4.800 amp, and D6.1200 amplifier. So this same software runs on all of those. And just to reiterate a little bit about what we talked about before, this software does run on mobile platforms as well. But for today's training, we're mostly focused on using it on a desktop or laptop, because to do updates and firmware and software upgrades, you need to be connected via USB, and the USB needs to go to a computer, whether it's Mac or PC. So
also,
right now I plugged in, oh, go ahead.
Also, whenever you open the software, before you connect, it's always going to default to the DM810. You don't have to do a drop down and say, oh, I want to plug into a D4800 or anything like that. You just open the app, it'll always say DM810, and then it'll actually change when it actually recognizes what it's connecting to. So you don't have to do anything beforehand. Just make sure both units are powered up, computer, laptop, whatever, and then plug in.
Yeah, and in fact, you really shouldn't get an opportunity to even click that drop down. When I opened this window before I started sharing my screen, I mean, I didn't have half a second to click anything before it popped up and asked for a password. If for some reason your computer is running slow and it does take a second for this dialog box to pop up, like Chris said, don't worry about clicking on any drop downs or anything like that. It's not going to do you any good anyway, because the software needs to auto recognize. So now that we're plugged in and up and running, one of the things that we should have happen is a couple of things there. Top right corner, you can see the little green dot is lit up. That shows us that we're connected. We have USB connectivity. The product is powered up, or at least you know, past step 1 at this point. The next thing that's going to ask is for a password, just like it says on the screen. It's defaulted to 1234. So I'm going to enter that in, hit OK, and this is going to come up, and I am running, in this case, this is a older version of the software. So again, if this was somebody that I was helping out, first thing I would do is go to the About section, and you can see this software build was March 26th of this year. So that's obviously months and months and months ago. This is a fairly old version of this software. So this would be one of the first things I would check. Where are we at? The app build and the firmware. That's the first things I always want to check. So just kind of, you don't have to write these down or anything, but just kind of keep these in mind. The app that we're looking at was built in March, and the firmware is 1.2.23. So that's the software version, or excuse me, firmware version that is loaded in this product currently. So because I opened up an older version of the software though, there's no prompt to update. So again, like Chris mentioned earlier, if you hadn't done a DM810 since maybe February, March, April, something like that, and this is the software you had on your computer, even though this may be a brand new DM810, if the software on your computer is older, it's not going to ask you to do anything with it, right? We're not going to be prompted to do any sort of updates or do anything with it. Or if this had been installed in a vehicle for a while and you're trying to update it, just because you plug in, it's not going to automatically prompt you to update. We need to make sure that we're using the latest version. So I'm going to close out this version of the DM-SmartDSP, and I'm going to open up the most current version, and I'll show you guys what that looks like here. So let's open this up. And
yeah, and
share again.
My recommendation, guys, is like this really is probably some of the, you know, the most difficult things when you're at the end of the day. Even yesterday, I had one of the most knowledgeable software, firmware, car audio guys on the East Coast call me, and it was, you know, 6 o'clock at night here, so I know it was 9 o'clock. I knew they'd probably been busy all day, and of course, you know, by that time they're going to be frustrated, right? So try to be patient. It really, you know, if we can get with you and have the time to walk you through it, it's literally just a few minutes to make sure that you're up to speed. You know, if you've been fumbling around for more than 20 minutes and it's within, you know, our tech support, just give us a quick call. Shoot me a message on Messenger, Facebook Messenger, whatever. You know, I try to do my best, and Matthew also does, to make sure that we're available as much as possible, and our team can get you guys through this rather quickly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things we see a lot too, is guys will stumble and fumble and mess around for hours and hours, sometimes days, trying to get something to work because they're just so reluctant to call tech support. And I get it. You know, most of us in this industry have had some horrible experiences with tech support. Excuse me. So, you know, most of us have dealt with the deal where you call and nobody answers, or you call and they put you on hold for an eternity, or you call and you deal with a phone tree and then you get hung up on and all that. It's not like that here. We have real people, you know, that are 30 feet from me right now in this building here in the US that provide tech support. Chris and I are fairly available as well. So, I mean, we have really, really good support for you guys when it comes to this stuff. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, I'll see somebody even post something online where they have this, you know, issue of connectivity, or they can't get in and they can't get it to connect or do whatever it is. And, there'll be all these opinions on what to do. And I'll just tell the person, hey, call tech support. I bet you they get you up and running. And sure enough, they'll normally let me know, yeah, it was a 2-minute phone call and he got me up and running. It's like, what, why struggle with it? Just give us a call. They'll get you up to speed. And also, if there is something really wrong where it can't happen, you're going to find out way faster by calling us or calling tech support, and we can tell you, hey, there's something actually wrong, rather than you messing with it for a day and a half, getting frustrated, trying to figure it out. So here we've connected to the later version of the software. This would be what you download from the website today. And same thing, I plug in the processor, it comes up, asks me for a password. I'm going to hit 1234. Get that typed in, hit OK, and it's going to pop up. Same thing. There's new firmware. Do you want to continue? Hit yes. By the way, if you hit no, it will let you hit no, but it's going to say, please update the firmware as soon as possible. There's really not a good reason for you to hit no. Even if you don't have internet connectivity, the firmware update is already on your computer if you have the software on your computer. So if you happen to be out in the parking lot or you happen to be on site or something like that, and you go, oh, I'm not going to do the update right now because I don't have any internet. It doesn't matter. You don't need internet to do the firmware update. The firmware is built into the software, remember, so it doesn't need any sort of internet connectivity or Wi-Fi in order to do the update. So this firmware upgrade will take a few seconds longer.
Connected to your PC.
Yep. Exactly, just needs to be USB. So this one will take a little bit longer since it is a processor instead of the DM-RTA, but while we wait for this one to come up, we'll also talk about how to manually force an update, again, in the off chance that something won't load, won't connect, won't come up, whatever the case may be. The other thing I want to talk about while this is upgrading real quick is the simple stuff, the things that people don't think about. So many times I get calls from guys that, hey, I downloaded the latest software. I think the product has the latest firmware. I can't get it to connect, or it just completed a firmware update and now they can't get it to connect. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the following usually works. And that is turn off the car, turn off the product if it's wired into the car, turn off the computer, close the app, all of that stuff, or close the software, I should say, reopen the software, turn the car back on, maybe start the car in case the battery is getting low, and then plug everything back in and see what you get. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they get connectivity again. Every once in a while you get that weird glitch where maybe it was too low of voltage or whatever the case may be. I've experienced in my own car, actually. I was trying to do the initial setup on my system when it first was installed, and over again, I got a product connected, disconnected, over and over again. Like, what is going on? Well, my car had been sitting in a shop getting worked on for a week, and they hadn't started it all week. So sure enough, I go there, turn the key on, 3 amplifiers power up, and I'm trying to plug into a DSP amp and set it up. No wonder it wouldn't stay on or connect. I was at about 10 volts. So classic example of why you should just start the car or have a battery tender of some sort on there.
I'm going to add 2 more cents. So I'm up to 4 cents for the day. On the login, if you change the password, if you're a shop owner or a install manager or something like that, and you have a team and you guys are changing the password, make it always the same password. So if you want to lock customers out, just make it 2222 or whatever, but make sure that all of your staff do it exactly the same. The last thing you want to do is have a car come back and that tech is no longer with you or whatever else. We can help you get through that, but if you want to save that call to tech support, make sure if one's changed, they're all changed, and they're all changed the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good, just best practice to have. At my shop, we used our address. The first 4, it was 1715 was our address. We just used that as the password for DSPs and things like that. You could use part of the shop's phone number, your address, whatever it is, but I would definitely make it something that has to do with the store. It shouldn't be your lead tech's birthday or, whatever. It should be something to do with the shop. That way, like Chris said, no matter who the staff is, it's always the same. So now that we've done that update, I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to go to Help, click About, and now we can see we've updated to 1.2.33. So we did upgrade our firmware version. and our app build, we're now using the latest released version of DM-SmartDSP. So now we know in the back of our mind, we're running the latest software, our product is running the latest firmware, and both us and our customer in the end should have a really good experience. Everything's been updated, any software fixes, glitches, whatever have been taken care of, and we're on the most current stuff. Now, if that update for some reason didn't take, the battery on your computer dies halfway through, the battery in the car dies halfway through, tech accidentally unplugs your USB cable, whatever, okay? For some reason, something interrupts it and you are afraid that you've bricked the product. I can't tell you, you know, how many times we hear that too. Well, I bricked it because the battery died in the middle of it. Nah, you didn't brick it. It takes quite a bit to actually brick these things, right? So what it really is 9 times out of 10, there needs to be a manual firmware update. And the way we're gonna do that is the same as on the DM-RTA. We're gonna go to Tools. We're gonna go down to Update Devices Firmware. And then whether you're using a Mac or a PC, this is gonna look different. So again, on a PC, it's gonna bring up your Windows Explorer. You wanna look at your C drive. Program Files x86 is the folder you're looking for. Within that is going to be all the different programs on your computer. You're looking for DM-SmartDSP. And then once you're within DM-SmartDSP, there's a folder in there that says something like products or devices or something along those lines.
Data.
And once you're, data, thank you, data. Once you're within data, then you'll see all of the different products. So you're going to see D4.800, D6.1200, you know, so on and so forth. Choose the product that you're working on, DM810 in this case, double click it and wait a few seconds. You should get a window that pops up and starts a percentage, just like as if it were doing a firmware update. And now you've manually forced that to update back to whatever is built into that software, okay? So on a Mac, you can see it on my screen. It's a little bit different, but it's the same idea. Rather than being in a folder called Program Files, it's just under the applications. So if you are looking on your computer itself, you can go down to Macintosh HD, Applications, and you'll see all of the different applications there. In this case, I would be looking at DM-SmartDSP, and you'll see it's a .bin file. We'd click Open and force it to do a manual update. So now that we've gotten software updates and firmware updates and all that stuff out of the way, I know it's not the most exciting stuff in the world to talk about, but Chris and I both feel it is super important, and hopefully it helps you guys in the long run to have less calls into tech support because you just know this stuff in the back of your mind. Or if you're a rep on this call, you can help some of the shops out there and some of the techs out there when they call you rather than calling us for whatever reason. So let's talk about some of the things within the software, how to do that stuff. Because some of the things we wanted to talk about besides firmware updates were how to switch presets, how to set up for multiple sources and things like that. So let's go into switching presets. Obviously within the software itself, when you're looking at it right now, up in the top right-hand corner, it says memory, hold to store, and you can see our 4 DSP presets up there. Now, this software is obviously not going to be open when we're looking at a customer's car. When we're in the customer's vehicle and the car is rolling down the road with the customer in it, they're not going to have access to this software. So yes, you can switch presets as the technician working on the car by clicking on those little buttons up there, but how is your customer going to switch through those presets? So the way that most people are going to do that is one of 2 ways. They're either going to be using the ACR3, which is our little controller here, or they're going to be using the DM Control app, and we'll go through both ways. So with the ACR3, it's really pretty simple. This is a push and a turn type knob. So the controller has 2 LEDs on it. There's a blue and a red. The blue is lit up right now. When I press the knob for a second, it'll light up the red, and I'm going to turn it a click, and it's going to flash however many presets or which preset it's on. So let me see if I can do it in front of the camera here to show you guys actually. See if I can get it up there far enough to show you this. Okay, so let's see.
And while he's showing you guys that, why would we want to change the presets? Why would the customer? So if you have a single seat car versus a 2-seat car, upmixed, or a different source.
Yep, that's a really good point. Yeah, why do we want to do different presets? One of those reasons Chris brought up there is the single seat, multi-seat, all seat, whatever the case may be. If this is your personal car, if this is going to be a demo vehicle for the shop or something like that, I always liked doing one with time alignment and one without, or one with EQ and time alignment and one with only EQ or something like that. And this is a really easy way to switch through those presets from the driver's seat without having software or anything like that. So again, you can see it actually fairly well with that camera. If you press in on this for a second, it switches to the red LED. We turn the knob. My finger's in the way, but it flashes the red LED to show you which preset you're on. So the red LED is going to either flash once, twice, 3 times, 4 times to show you which preset you're on. Now, if you roll the knob to the right, you're going up in the presets. If you roll the knob to the left, you're going down. If you're on preset number 4 and you want to go all the way to 1, you can click this, turn it, and just turn it, 3 or 4 times fast to go all the way down to the bottom of the scale. So if that makes sense, if you were on 1 and wanted to go all the way to 4, same thing, press and hold, get to red, spin the knob a few times, it's going to flash 4 times red, and now I'm all the way to the other end of the scale. If I want to go from 4 to 3, it's the same process, but I'm just going to go 1 click. The knob has detents in it, so 1 click would be from 4 to 3. Hopefully that makes some sort of sense. We'll also show you how to do that with the BT24 and the DM608. Now, one of the reasons I want to show you on here as well, and I don't have this already plugged in, is this is another common tip that I wanted to show you guys, and that is if your DM608 or your D series product, whatever it is already powered up, and you take a BT24 and plug it in there, a lot of times you'll get nothing, right? Same thing over here. If I take this over to my DM810 and I plug this in, you might get the blue light to flash, but you usually won't get the yellow app light. And to be able to connect to this for DM control or the DM-SmartDSP app, we need that yellow light to flash, okay? Now, if you wait 30 seconds or so, sometimes you'll get this to pop up to app connect mode, but really what needs to happen is this needs to be plugged in and there needs to be power cycled to the product. So leave it plugged into the product, disconnect power or turn the vehicle off, whatever the case may be, and then wait a few seconds, give power back to the product, and we can usually get the little yellow light to be flashing as well. The little yellow light does have to come up in order for you to get app connectivity, right? So let me see, I'll disconnect this for a second and let it sit for a sec here. And then we'll plug that back in, see if we can get yellow light to start flashing. And then I'll be able to do a live demo of the DM control app for you.
Another nice thing in talking about software firmware is, we're not afraid to hard reset the product. Like even if you're in the middle of a tune or anything like that, we obviously travel all around and do trainings all over the place. And we literally just unplug. I mean, a trainer will be coming in behind us. We can take it, unplug it, just hard unplug it, and we can wait a month and plug right back into it, at the next training session. I can see exactly where I was in my last presentation with that product. So a lot of guys say, oh, it doesn't save, it doesn't do this. Most of the time, like I said, it's because you're using a phone or a wireless device. If you're hardwired, I've never once been able to justify or see that happening where you lose a tune with the product. It doesn't matter how hard you reset it, surge it, whatever, it pops right back up usually. I mean, every time I've seen it.
Now that I've power cycled the product too, I think you guys can see that I've got both yellow light flashing and the blue light flashing. So what you need is both of those to be flashing, and then we can connect our DM control app. So I'm going to open up the app and I'm going to actually screen share here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Yeah, another thing that happens is now we're adding a third element into the mix. So we went over the hardwired software firmware updates and all that stuff. Now, when you're wirelessly trying to connect, now we're talking about a third device that has to be aligned with the software firmware. So as long as the update is current, right, and you do the software from our website, and then you connect, you have your yellow light flashing, and then you use your phone like Matthew's doing. What are you going to see, Matthew?
So this is exactly what you're going to see. You guys should be seeing my phone on your screen right now. So with it like that, this is what you're going to see. It's going to ask you to select your Bluetooth device. So it's basically the number that you're seeing on there, the SP11482, is the serial number of the ACBT24. So generally speaking, for you guys, there's only going to be one ACBT24 in the vicinity, so there should only be one. Here at Audio Control, if I click that drop-down menu, there's probably 20 of them right now. I'm just going to show you this one since it is obviously correct. So I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to say, please wait, don't close, and then this will connect. And where it says status, you're going to see that it pops up the name of the product as well. You can see the little green light lit up, and DM-810 is online. So now this is what I see on my DM Control app. So like I was telling you guys earlier, if you have a customer that's not comfortable with the ACR3, if they don't like the physical controller, maybe they didn't buy one, maybe they don't want to buy one, maybe they don't want a physical knob mounted in the car, they don't, whatever the case may be, right? Maybe they just want it to be wireless. This is a great way for consumers to be able to have a little bit of control over that DM processor or D-series amplifier without having to have a physical knob. So on the screen itself here, now we have a physical volume knob or master volume. Now, depending on how you have your preset set up, this is either sub volume or master volume, depending on how you've set up the actual software itself. Down here at the bottom, you can see your 4 memory presets. To select one, all we have to do is tap it, and it'll say, please wait, don't close, and it'll switch the preset on the product itself. You can see it switched to preset number 2. Just like that. It's super, super easy. Now, I don't have the presets named on this product, but within the software itself, if you wanted to name those different presets, you certainly can, and they will show up on the app itself. You can even name them here within the app. So if I wanted to call memory 2 something other than memory 2, maybe I want to call this whatever, 2-seat tune.
Bass.
What's that? Bass in your face.
One of the things I wanted to point out is if you have a customer that does have an iPad, right? The app on the iPad is super cool. If I was doing an iPad install in a car, I would almost certainly use an audio controlled DSP. I mean, I could almost guarantee you if somebody has an iPad installed in their car, I would use the audio control, because look at how cool that is to be able to have your sub controller right on that. I mean, and be able to recall presets. So even if you had to have one as a master volume control, you could go through and quickly, you know, have a master volume control knob that's that big right on their dash. It's really cool.
It is very, very cool. Like I said, especially anybody doing a tablet install in their car, how cool would it be to have a virtual sub controller or a virtual, you know, DSP preset right there on their dash? It's pretty darn cool. So a couple of things that I wanted to show you guys too before we wrap things up. One of the things that we get asked and has been a topic recently is how to set up for multiple sources and how to do the presets so that one is master volume and one is sub volume only. So you should be seeing my DM-810 screen right now. So on the DM-810 software, if you go to the output view, the first thing I want to show you how to do is basically designate what is master volume and what is sub volume. So in this first example, let's just say that we want, let's do master volume first. So if we wanted to have master volume control over all of the outputs in this system, all we've got to do is click on the output channels, and where it says remote volume level, click that and make sure it's highlighted in blue. Basically, every output that has this lit up in blue is going to be controlled by the ACR3, by the dash controller, and by the DM Control app, okay? So make sure that whichever one that you're using, you know, make sure that that is highlighted. So again, I'm gonna go through all these outputs real quick. I'm just gonna highlight these, and with all of these lit up, now all of my channels, in this case 10, all 10 channels now have that level lit up, right? I'm not paying attention to any other settings here, guys, because I'm trying to just go through this quickly for you. But all of those have remote level highlighted. So right now, the ACR3 is going to control the level of all 10 outputs at the same time, master volume. So if I want preset number 1 to be master volume, I've done that. Press and hold the number 1 on the number 1 itself, not where it says memory 1, on the little number 1. And it's going to say, are you sure you wish to overwrite? Yes, I do. Now my preset number 1 is master volume. Now maybe preset number 2, I want to have be sub volume. So let's go through and let's unselect this on a handful of these. And I'm just going to say outputs 7 and 8 are going to be my subwoofer in this case, just for argument's sake. So 7 and 8 are the only one that have remote volume level enabled. I'm now going to press and hold on number 2, say yes. And now on preset number 2, I've got a sub volume controller. On preset number 1, I have a master volume. So again, if I click through all my output channels, you'll see that remote level is highlighted. If I go to preset number 2, the only one with remote volume highlighted is output 7 and 8. So that's how you do master volume versus sub volume. Let's also quickly talk about how to set up for multiple sources. It's very, very similar. So let's say on preset number 1, we want our input to these outputs to be maybe the factory head unit. So the factory head unit is on inputs 1 and 2. So I'm going to make sure that on all of these channels, I only have inputs 1 and 2 lit up. So what that's going to do is make sure that only that factory head unit is providing the input to all of these channels worth of output, okay? So let's say I have full range coming in on inputs 1 and 2. That's great. Let's press and hold number 1 to save that. So now what I've got is preset number 1 is master volume, and full range in on numbers 1 and 2 inputs is providing output to all of those channels. Now, maybe on a different preset, I want to use input 7 and 8, which could be my ACBT24, because this is designated as input 7 and 8, or maybe I want to, you know, have a separate Bluetooth controller or an aux-in cable or a satellite radio portable, whatever that auxiliary source is, okay? So same thing. Let's go in, and I'm going to use a different preset this time, but it's basically the same idea. I'm just going to only highlight 7 and 8 instead as my inputs. Now, you don't want to have both in this case because they will play at the same time, because it is summing those together. So you wouldn't want to start streaming and have it play the factory radio and the streaming audio at the same time. So let's make sure only 7 and 8 is highlighted. I'm going to click preset number 3 and save it. And there we go. So preset number 3 is now going to have the same settings, but my input, you can see, is only set to source 7 and 8. On preset number 2, my input on that one is going to be 1, 2, right? Sorry, preset number 1 is inputs 1, 2 are my source. So that's how you could set it up separately for, say, a factory radio and an aftermarket source, or you could even do it different presets, I should say, for phone calls. You know, a lot of you guys want to use time correction and that sort of thing to try to make this sound as good as we can, but maybe for phone calls and that, you know, you want different EQ settings, or you want different time correction or no time correction at all, most likely. That would be a really easy way to do it, is set up a DSP preset, set up maybe, you know, preset number 1 is for phone calls and preset number 2 is for audio or something like that. So with 4 presets, the options are really pretty endless with that stuff. There's not a lot that you can't do.
One of the cool things that even yesterday I was working with one of our dealers, and he has a Subaru with a navigation screen up top. Now, there's an application where you might want to have your ACBT24 for streaming and your factory radio on one preset together. And the reason you would want to do that is for navigation prompts. So you can literally turn off the radio and stream, even though they're summed together, and navigation prompts will still come through your streaming content through there. So there are applications where you might want to use one or the other, and there's applications you would want to use both of them at the same time. The beauty of the DM processor is that you have that ability. You can go through and sum whatever you want or unsum whatever you want.
Not only that, but you will have independent level on those as well. So if, say, all of the navigation prompts come out of the center channel, you could bring that center channel in as a, as an input source, maybe bring the level of it down a little bit so that those nav prompts aren't blasting them out of the vehicle, but they could just mix those navi prompts right into the rest of the sound system. That same thing applies for some of you guys doing custom radar installs, the fully installed systems. That's a popular application too. You could take the speaker output from one of those radar laser systems and feed it into the DSP. And when those alerts come up, they don't have to try to hear some little tiny external speaker that you've buried under the dash somewhere. They could actually hear it come out of the entire system. Now, again, you'd want to make sure levels are set correctly and that sort of thing, but pretty cool to be able to just mix that into the sound while streaming or playing the factory radio. What a great way to mix that in and be able to offer something to your customer that probably no other shop is going to offer or think of in your area. Be pretty unique feature to be able to offer for sure. So with that, that pretty much brings us to the end of things as far as what I had planned for today. It's been about a little over an hour here, so I don't want to take up your guys' whole day. If there's any questions or anything, now's a great time to get those out there while we still have a few minutes. Was there anything we didn't get answered on Facebook, Chris, or on Zoom?
Nope, we're looking good. I think on the app, just possibility of adding landscape mode. So one of the things, like, if they are doing an iPad install, you would want to make sure that you're using, it would have to be mounted that way, because as you can see, if it turns, it does not rotate. So that's something that we can look at, but right now that's the way it is. We want to see a lot more of you guys using the ACBT24 to its fullest capabilities, because it is really cool. It makes it very much easier to control, to have that ability to use that versus the ACR3.
Absolutely. So with that, you guys, I think that was pretty much all of the questions and everything for today. So want to say thank you again for joining us.